First of all, welcome, 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 everybody. It is so great to have you all with us and to share an evening for an hour together. And we have to do more of this. We've been very busy at the theater. We announced today that Christmas Carol, we're going to tape it, a new version, and we're going to give it to the entire city. And we've got, I think, 47 school systems that we're going to send it to and participate. And it's fabulous. And the actors are recording it in their homes. And it'll be really fun. We've got a videographer who's doing it, and it'll be great. Brandon Weinbrenner's directing. So we're excited about that, and it'll be a great gift to the city. So I have on my agenda to thank Jill Risley and Jillian Jopling and Michelle Collins for hosting us. They are the chairs of our Artistic Director Circle, and we're very appreciative of them, and we're very appreciative of all of you for supporting us. I have to tell you, we have 105 employees that are depending on you, and I want you to know that of all the theaters in America, we have the most still employed. And I think we can take great pride in that. And the fact that we have such great support here in Houston, and we're still pumping out product. The education department, if you go online and you see our website, Alley at Home, look at all the stuff that they've been doing. They're doing all kinds of things in the schools, and it's just great. So we're nonstop. I'm going to introduce our artistic director, the man of the hour, ladies and gentlemen, the one that is guiding us through all the COVID, Mr. Rob Melrose.
Hello. Hey, thanks, Dean. Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. Well, yeah, Dean and I are all dressed up today, not only for this, but for our announcement of Christmas Carol this morning. So I hope you saw that online, and we are really excited. As you know, when COVID hit, we decided, some theaters just shut down and laid off 80% of their employees. We made a really different decision. We decided that we were going to continue to pursue our mission with whatever means we had, and it's caused us to go on this kind of two-prong strategy. So one prong is kind of this digital side of things. So the minute we closed the day after 1984 opened, and we immediately filmed 1984, got it online. People all over the country saw it. People all over the world saw it. And then we started something called Alley at Home, which if you visit our website, it's just terrific. We started with the resident acting company doing sonnets. Shakespeare sonnets. They've been kind of inside the resident acting company studio interviews. We have little Coke cocktail things. And then the education and community engagement department has just been doing tons of stuff for community engagement, but also for students. And that's all available for you. And they're really delightful. They're really fun. We also did a lot for Hispanic Heritage Month. And coming up, we've got a lot of programming that's going to be on Alley at Home. For Halloween, we've got our Thrills and Chills series, which is stories by Agatha Christie, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Edgar Allan Poe, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and many others. So all the things that you're used to seeing in the summer with our summer chills, we had the resident acting company do those stories, and they're going to be a lot of fun. And then we have a whole series coming up, including plays by Strindberg, Ibsen, Pirandello, and Euripides, and lots and lots of new plays. We just did an early draft preview of a play by Sean Hamilton about the jazz musician Arnett Cobb, and we've got lots of new short plays and also longer plays to share with you. So that all goes and all by some of our favorite playwrights. And speaking of some of our favorite playwrights, we've got Liz Duffy Adams here today, and her play Born with Teeth is part of this other prong of the strategy, which is the stuff on stage. And because we've got a resident acting company, which is pretty unique in the United States, it meant that we just kept on working. So we kept on rehearsing both plays that we were going to do online and prepping plays that we plan to do on the Hubbard stage, socially distanced as soon as it was safe. And Michael Locher has done a brilliant job of designing what we're calling our flexible rep set, which is a really ingenious thing, where the bones of the set work for all 5 plays that we announced for this season. And it means that we can that we can really nimbly go from one play to the other. So we knew that this season was going to be very unpredictable, and we wanted to have the flexibility to kind of go from show to show without a lot of fuss, so that whatever punches came our way, we'd be able to roll with them. And that is what we're doing. We've got our 5 plays. The set is almost built. We're building the set right now. The plays we announced, as you probably know, Sweat by Lynn Nottage, which won the Pulitzer Prize, and really fascinating play about tensions in Reading, Pennsylvania, after a factory closes, and what that means to the workers there. Really, in-depth look at race relations in the United States. And so, during this time of Black Lives Matter, it's especially interesting for us to explore that play. The next play is Sarah Ruhl's play, Deadman's Cell Phone, which is a fascinating play about a woman who's in a cafe trying to get some writing done, and the guy at the table next to her, his phone keeps going off, and she says, "Hey, could you get that? I'm trying to write." The phone keeps going off. Finally, she gets fed up. She answers it. She says, "Hello," and it's for the guy. And she taps the guy, and it turns out he's dead. That's why he didn't answer his phone. And so she lies about him being alive and why she answered the phone. And her lie takes her on this wild journey, and that leads her to love and understanding about life and death. It's really a beautiful, beautiful play. Then Waiting for Godot, our classic of the 20th century. Many people think it's one of the greatest plays of the 20th century. I certainly do. It's absurdism, it's existential, but it's also very, very funny, and it fits our company beautifully. Sean Hamilton and David Rainey play the 2 main parts, along with Jay Sullivan and Dylan Godwin. And the reason I wanted to do it at this point is I feel like by the time we get back in the Hubbard Theater, our audience is going to have a relationship with waiting that nobody had 2 years ago. And it's almost as if, we had to go through COVID to really understand Beckett's play. And I think, as we workshopped it a few months ago, we just were having all these insights that, because so much of it is about how life is a lot of waiting, but what's interesting is what happens while you're waiting and the relationships you make while you're waiting. And it's very beautiful, and it's very, very funny. Beckett was very influenced by the great comedic teams like Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello. Then we're also going to be doing high school play and Nostalgia Fest, a world premiere by Vichet Chum, and this was workshopped in our Allial New Festival. And this is a play about the Texas One Act Play Festival, which many of you know is a very, very serious sport. And in order to field a football team in Texas, you also have to field a drama department, and enter this contest. And so this play, if you're from Texas, it's especially fun. But even if you're not, it reminds you of your time in high school when you first started falling in love with theater and what theater did for you and how it allowed you to express yourselves. And also Vichet Chum, who's Cambodian American, really writes about what it's also like to be an outsider in high school. So it's we worked on it at UCross. It was part of our inaugural Alley Theater at UCross Writers Retreat. And so Vichet came and worked on it. And during that time, I knew it was funny, but as he wrote, he got deeper and deeper into it and really got some really poignant moments out of the play. And when I saw it at the festival, I was just blown away by how moved I was. I knew I was going to be laughing, but I was also really moved. And then, of course, we're also going to be doing the world premiere of Born with Teeth, which was also part of our Allial New readings. And Liz was with us working with Dylan and Jay on the roles of Shakespeare and Marlow. I'm going to introduce Liz with her credits and all that. But first, I've known Liz for almost 25 years now. We met in grad school, and one of the things you were able to go to the library and see what the playwrights were working on. And I don't even Liz even knows this, but so you got to read kind of what they were working on, and Liz was working on a play called Teacup for a Shallow Apocalypse, which is kind of a post-apocalyptic modern reimagining of Shakespeare's play The Tempest. And I was just blown away by it for a number of reasons. One, the language just was so rich and delightful. So she really has a poet's heart and a poet's sensibility. And at the same time, and I didn't know this at the time, but it was real. The work was really actable, and I think it comes from the fact that Liz spent a good deal of her career as an actor, and she's a good actor, because I've actually heard her read her own work, and so she's really got a sense of what not only what's poetic, because she's really got a great sense of that. She also really knows how to make it something that an actor would want to say. And of course, when Jay and Dylan were working on these plays, they just tore in to the repartee and the wit of Born with Teeth, and that's something that kind of flows through all of Liz's work, and in the Bay Area, she and I worked on a number of different plays, the Train play, Wet, and Dog Act, which make her kind of her travel trilogy, which we'll talk about. And of course, I went to New York to see her off-Broadway production of Or. And let me just read you a little bit about Liz. So that's my personal connection to Liz, and I'm so excited to share her work with you. But I also want you to know her credits. So here we go. Liz Duffy Adams' play Or premiered off-Broadway at the Women's Project Theater, and has been produced some 70 times since, including the Magic Theater, Seattle Rep, Roundhouse Theater. She's a New Dramatist alumna and has received Women of Achievement Award, Lillian Hellman Award, New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship, Weston Playhouse Music Theater Award, Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship, and the Will Glickman Award. Her work has also been produced or developed at the Alley Theater. I love that it's first. This is from her website, so we are first on her website. Thank you, Liz. The Contemporary American Theater Festival, Humana Festival, Bay Area Theater Festival, Portland Center Stage, Syracuse Stage, New George's, Club Thumb, Cutting Ball, that's the theater I founded in San Francisco, Shotgun Players, Greater Boston Theater Company, and Crowded Fire, among others. Other plays include Born with Teeth, Dog Act, the Saloniers, Dear Alien, Wonders of the Invisible World, Buccaneers, Wet, or Isabella the Pirate Queen Enters the Horse Latitudes, The Listener, The Reckless, Ruthless, Brutal Charge of It, or The Train Play, and One Big Lie. Adams has an MFA from the Yale School of Drama and a BFA from New York University, and was the 2012-2013 Briggs Copeland Visiting Lecturer in Playwriting at Harvard University. She has dual Irish and American citizenship and lives in New York City on land that once belonged to the Lenape in the Western Mass on the Pecumtuck and Nipmuc land. All right, Liz, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
That was a lot about me. That was fun.
Yay, yay.
It's so nice to see you, Rob.
It's great to see you. It's great to see you. Oh, I'm supposed to remind everybody to mute your microphones. So yeah, but when we do question and answers, please feel free to raise your hand, and when we do Q&A, that's how we'll call on you. So Liz, Born with Teeth is about William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, and it's tricky because it's not only about them, but it has a lot to do with a really important new discovery about them. It's hard to imagine that there could be new news about 400-year-old playwrights, but 5 years ago, they announced some new news about them, which we'll share with you in a second, and it made theater nerds everywhere very, very excited. But first, before we get to the new news, Liz, will you give us just a little bit of a background on Shakespeare and Marlowe, who they were, what's interesting about them, why we're so excited about these two guys?
Sure. And hi, it's nice to see all these other faces and to feel like I'm virtually in beautiful Houston. Yes, so Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, Elizabethan era playwrights and poets. They were exactly the same age. But Christopher Marlowe was a huge hit, much bigger news before Shakespeare was. He wrote a string of amazing plays that were very popular. Tamburlaine, Massacre at Paris, Jew of Malta, Dr. Faustus, a couple of others. And he was also a spy, which makes him kind of interesting. And also he was assassinated in 1592. There's a fantastic book by historian Charles Nichols called The Reckoning, which is a big source for me, all about the mystery of who killed Marlowe. There's still a mystery to it, which is why I got to take advantage of it and make up my own answer. And then, of course, Shakespeare was not a spy. Shakespeare played things much more carefully and did not get murdered and had a long life and a fantastic career. So they were very different characters.
And I mean, the thing that I always think is so fascinating is if Shakespeare died at the same time Marlowe did, if they had died together, remind us what plays Shakespeare had written at this point.
Titus Andronicus and the
Comedy of Errors.
Comedy of Errors. Yeah, I mean, he really he had not come to his full fruition yet.
He would have been a very, very minor playwright if he had died when Marlowe died. And of course, Marlowe, even though he died at such a young age, is known for being kind of the pioneer of blank verse, and these plays, Dr. Faustus and Tamburlaine, are considered masterpieces, and so that's something that's really interesting. So also something a lot of people don't know about Elizabethan England is, even if Shakespeare hadn't been there, there were enough famous playwrights during that time that it still would have been one of the greatest periods of theatrical history. So there's Ben Jonson, there's Webster, Kidd, there's all these really, really major playwrights. The problem is Shakespeare eclipsed them all, so we mainly hear about Shakespeare, but there are lots of great playwrights from the period, and of course the best, I think, is Marlowe. So
yeah.
And tell us about the new news that prompted you to write the play.
Yes, Shakespearean scholars announced that they had proven with science, to their satisfaction, that Shakespeare and Marlowe had collaborated on the Henry VI cycle, Henry VI parts 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, that was, and collaboration amongst Elizabethan playwrights was not at all unusual. It was frequent, I think partly because there was such a demand for product. I think they had to help each other turn plays out. But the idea that Marlowe and Shakespeare wrote these plays together in some sense, and there's no proof that they were in a room together writing. They might have collaborated by somebody handing their pages back and forth to them, or just sending them straight to the producer and him stitching them together, or but what fun is that? So yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of when I directed Pericles at the Public, I had the pleasure of working with Jim Shapiro, who's one of the great Shakespearean scholars, and he pointed out that Pericles was also a collaboration between Shakespeare and a much lesser poet, a guy named Wilkins, and really a lot of Shakespeare plays are collaborations. So the Scottish play Macbeth, right, is really written by. I'm not really in a theater. Was really written by Shakespeare and Middleton. So was Timon of Athens, Shakespeare and Middleton. But when you go to a bookstore, the spine of the book doesn't say Shakespeare and Middleton. It just says Shakespeare. But it would be more accurate to put both playwrights, and Jim Shapiro kind of explained that the way the work would often get divided up is that the beginning playwright the novice playwright would get the beginning and the end, and the master playwright, the expert playwright, would get the middle, and the way they kind of prove this is using the same computer programs, how they pick up a piece of music and can put it in a computer and tell, oh, is that Bach, is that Beethoven, is it Mozart, because there are certain patterns of composing. Well, the same thing's true of words. So they have these programs where they think they can through patterns of words say to the scene, this scene is written by Shakespeare, this scene is written by Marlowe. And anyway, so this is very exciting because, we knew Shakespeare worked with Wilkins and Beaumont and Fletcher and Middleton, but to think that he worked with the other greatest playwright, and actually a playwright who was at the time much better than he was, wow, how exciting. And so Liz, without giving away the whole play, tell a little bit about what you imagine, because you did imagine them in the same room together, and what was that like?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I had to imagine that I mean, a lot of people have played around with the rivalry of Shakespeare and Marlowe. Although, of course, as you point out, there was really no rivalry. I mean, Marlowe was so far beyond him. But that Marlowe, that how working with Marlowe would have influenced Shakespeare. Like, would Shakespeare be Shakespeare if he hadn't had some kind of experience that shook him up as a playwright in a really radical way. Because as you point out, the early plays didn't show all that much promise. It was just okay. But I mean, my first response to thinking about it was just sort of visceral. Was reading Marlowe's work and reading Shakespeare's work, you end up with a sort of a sense of who they were, and they just feel so different. Marlowe is so flashy and aggressive and mercurial. I mean, you feel him in the work, and whereas Shakespeare, I feel as though he disappears in the work much more, which makes him potentially a really interesting character as well. Like, who is he? But they just feel so different, and the fact that they were relatively young men, they were in their late 20s. Just sort of in a gut sense, it was, oh, I want to get them in a room and see what happens.
Dumb. And something I learned really from your play is, in my head, because Queen Elizabeth was so brilliant and so enlightened and such a good leader, I always imagined Elizabethan England as very stable and very calm and very enlightened, and going into Liz's world, but then of course reading The Reckoning and reading more about it, I really started to learn, oh my gosh, this time was much more dark and tumultuous than I ever gave it credit for. And I wondered if you could talk.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, we think of the Elizabethan age, it's set in stone. She had this huge long reign, and it was but at the time, of course, day by day, they didn't know it was going to last like that. There were constant assassination plots and overturn the monarchy plots. It was only a generation into a whole new religion. Her father, Henry VIII, created the Church of England, and suddenly it was illegal to be a Catholic. So of course there were a lot of Catholics who were happy about that. And Queen Elizabeth oversaw the creation of, as I understand, the world's first Secret Service, a huge spy network. As a response to the incredible danger and the difficulty of maintaining stability. I love the Shakespeare's in Love, and I love Ren Fairs and all of that sort of thing. But in fact, it was a police state. It was a very dangerous place to be. And I always think of the Graham Greene line from Our Men in Havana, something to the effect of there is the torturable class and the non-torturable class. And playwrights were firmly in the torturable class. It was no protection to be popular. Thomas Kidd, who had a huge hit with the Spanish tragedy, was tortured. That was how you interviewed people. That's how you interrogated people. And so it was dangerous. Shakespeare was that close. And Marlowe, in fact, was murdered for it because of his involvement in that shady world. So, yeah, it was rough.
Awesome, yay! Well, I don't want to give away too much about the play, and I want.
I stopped saying that Marlowe was killed, but everybody knows that, right?
Yeah, but we yes.
But there's still surprises in the play.
I once, because I never go, people who love the classics, right, like me, never go to plays to be surprised. We go to plays to see how they do things, right? But I made the biggest mistake of my life when my dad and a friend of his, a couple, they bought us really expensive tickets to M. Butterfly, and of course, there was a 60 Minutes article about it. There was newspaper articles about it. And at dinner before the show, I said, "Oh, I can't wait to see how they deal with the fact that, you know, that she's actually a man." And they freaked out and they said, "You ruined it. You ruined it." It was like, you know, they've been talking about this for months. Are you serious? But anyway, so I ruin things all the time. But anyway, yeah, Marlowe dies, but that's definitely old.
But how?
The how? Well, that's it. That's why I go to the theater. Just not the what, but the how. The how. And speaking of the how, I'd love for our Alley audience members to get to know a little bit about you as a writer. You know, because you know, first of all, tell us a little bit like who are your influences? Who, you know, what writers get you excited?
Well, of course, there's a difference between influence and who gets you excited, because
Yes.
comes earlier. I think I'm just going to say right now that my favorite living playwright right now, I think, is Anne Washburn. I'm always incredibly excited by her work, and she has a play that I hope I'm not missing it. The public is doing a virtual version of it. You can see it online. It's called
Shipwrecked?
Yeah. Anyway.
She's done a version of the Twilight Zone that we're actually looking at. They did it in London, and I thought it would be a
London, yeah, they did.
Yeah,
she's amazing. But when I think about influences, I mean, it theatrically speaking, it kind of does start with Shakespeare. I mean, the first play I ever saw was Twelfth Night. I didn't grow up in a theater going environment, and I was in my teens, and it was a field trip, and I was absolutely stunned, and it literally changed my life. I waited until everyone left the theater, and I was completely alone in the theater, no ushers or anything, and I took one step onto the stage. It was very theatrical. It was very I don't know what this is, but I shall belong here. And 3 years later, I was studying acting in New York.
Amazing.
So it did change my life, unfortunately. But you know, and Beckett, Samuel Beckett. You're doing. Yeah. You pronounce it Godot. There's a lot of debate.
Yes.
Yeah. And Mac Wellman, more recently, Wally Shawn, Carol Churchill. Yeah, and you know, honestly, I also want to mention Walt Kelly, who wrote the comic strip Pogo, because there's so much wordplay, and I grew up on it, and the characters are so vivid, and I feel that it's a very deep influence, in fact.
Well, speaking of wordplay, because there is so much wordplay, and there's so much richness to your writing. And you're very quotable. What would you say is your approach to writing? I mean, what's your process? What are you after when you're writing? Yeah.
I mean, my process varies in a way from play to play. I usually try to set myself an interesting sort of formal challenge, like, well, I've never written a two-hander. Can I keep something going with only two actors on the stage and nobody else is coming in, you know? Or Wet, the play you mentioned, was I wanted to write a Shakespearean romance in my own way. But also, it really just sort of comes down to getting obsessed with an idea, just the kernel of an idea, and finding a starting place, and then just diving in and letting it flow. Like, I know the beginning, and sometimes I have a rough idea of what's going to happen, but I like to write to find out. So for me, that keeps it really active and exciting for me. And I always feel that, you know, the process of writing usually does sort of translate into what the experiences of the audience ultimately. Like, if you're surprised, you know, or maybe just to say, if you're never surprised in the writing, how can you surprise an audience? And to surprise is the most fun thing in the theater. In little ways, you know, you didn't expect that line, or story ways, or And you know, and as far as language goes, I mean, I don't think I would have become a playwright if I was growing up now, because I grew up in a time when you had acres of time to be bored and daydream, and all I did was read. So I was made by language, and it's such a visual world now. I don't know, maybe that's not true. Maybe there's another way to get there. But anyway.
And you know, you're also one of the few, you know, modern playwrights who you know, writes regularly in Iambic Pentameter. I mean, not you know, I mean, often not whole plays, but like I remember in Wet, there's a character who'll write whole speeches in Iambic Pentameter. Tell us what, you know, what's that like? And of course, Iambic Pentameter, it's like the, you know, the 5 feet per line, a light followed by a strong ba-dum, 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 right?
That's mercy is not strained. Be not strained. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it was just when I did it the first time, it was just an experiment. Again, sort of a formal experiment. I wanted to play around with it. What I found was, it really felt like getting onto a horse and the horse galloping away with you. That rhythm is so powerful. And I mean, what's difficult is to stop it. I mean, a speech will go on for pages if you let it. It's just, there's something so instinctive. I mean, I think the reason Iambic Pentameter works, right, is that it's a very instinctive rhythm. You know, I think very often we don't realize we're almost talking in Iambic Pentameter, or we literally are. Or we literally are. No, that wasn't it. But yeah, I just find it really satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was it Wet? Was it the first time you wrote in Iambic Pentameter?
You know, I know there was some verse in Dog Act, but I'm trying to remember now. There's some verse in Dog Act, but I don't think it's Iambic Pentameter. So I think at least with Wet, it was the first time I was really deliberately, because that was my Shakespearean romance.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, you're hitting on, you know, 3 plays that are really dear to my heart, because they were the time when we were working together a lot. Yeah. Wet, Dog Act, and The Reckless, Ruthless, Brutal Charge of It, or the Train play. Will you tell us a little bit about those 3 plays and how they fit together? Because I just think it's an amazing series.
Well, I think of them as my travel plays, because it's the first one takes place on a train, and the second one on a ship, and the third one people walking through a wilderness. And I mean, it's partly just that I like the idea of a travel play because there's sort of a built-in structure. It kind of automatically takes, you know, we're going somewhere, and maybe we're going to get there, or maybe we're not going to get there. But there's something really appealing about that to me. Those are my 3 favorite modes of travel: train, walking, and ships. I haven't really been on a ship, but you know, at least theoretically, out on the ocean. And also, you know, I actually really like plays that take place outside. I mean, a lot of my plays do go inside, but I like the sense that that the whole world is there, that the context is you can feel the earth turning under you. That for me is also kind of satisfying. The train play also was influenced by a director in your program, Andrew Utter, who I worked with, because he said to me one day, this is such a grad school thing, but he said to me one day something like, Liz, you know what your problem is? I was like, what? You know, and he said, you love your characters too much. And I was like, oh, you ain't seen nothing yet. So I just sat down and wrote a play about characters who I really, really loved. Yeah.
And I've directed that one, and it was such a fabulous experience. It's just such a great play. And you know, there's another play you wrote about a writer, which, and I had no idea it was done. It's been done 70 times. That's amazing.
Probably more by now. Yeah.
Wow. Which is about Aphra Behn, who's famous for being the first woman to make her career as a writer. Yeah, that's And tell us a little bit about Or. I saw it off Broadway. It was just wonderful and delightful. I also saw it at the Magic, so I've seen it twice.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I this goes back, the kernel of it, the original spark of it goes back 20 years. I had been thinking about writing a play about Kit Marlowe. I was reading his works and I was a spy, he was fabulous. And then I opened the Village Voice and there was, the Public Theater is doing a play about Christopher Marlowe by David Grimm. So mad. And then I stumbled upon the story of Aphra Behn, who was the first woman to make her living as a playwright in the English language. And she was also a spy. And she also had a pretty interesting life. So I wrote a 10-minute play about her for a festival. And then I thought, there's something here. But I didn't know what my entry point was. I didn't know how to write it. And I just thought about it in the back of my mind for 10 years. And I kept reading about the period and about her. And then certain things clicked in that made it possible for me to write it. And then I wrote it in 2 weeks.
Got it.
And I wrote it not knowing what was going to happen. I'm like, and then she takes the gun and says, tell me the truth. And I didn't know what the truth was and it doesn't work. And I'm like, she has to keep trying. And that's my most produced play.
Yeah, and it's fabulous. And she's the great writer of the Restoration, Restoration comedy, which is how many years after Shakespeare's time?
I always get a little bit fuzzy when I haven't looked up the dates recently, but I know that her producer's late husband claimed to be Shakespeare's bastard child. So it was, sort of a generation and a half.
A generation and a half. That's great. That's great. And lastly, and I want to open up for questions in a bit, is something I love that you're into is science fiction in the theater and apocalyptic post-apocalyptic plays. And we often think of science fiction as the province of movies or novels, but there's actually a nice tradition of science fiction in the theater. And I just want to hear from you. What are the challenges and what are the possibilities that theater offers science fiction?
Well, the wonderful fact that anything can happen in the theater. I mean, anything can happen in the theater. Science fiction is I think incredibly theatrical. You look at a play like Pericles and it's got like 18 locations and decades of time jumps, and or any Shakespeare play, people are running in and out fighting wars, and it happens on a blank stage. It's all in the language. So what can't you do? And I mean, for me, science fiction, experimental theater, classical theater, these are things that are large and theatrical, and where the language can be something that you can really work with. And all of these things sort of orbit around our present world right now. I mean, you write historical or you write science fiction in order to talk about what's happening right now obliquely, which for me is always a more resonant way to talk about it, and a more expansive way to talk about it, and for me, more exciting way to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, Born with Teeth, I'll just say, is very much about our present moment in history, even though it's, as steeped in real historical information as I could make it.
Yeah. Which is one of the things I love about it, and bringing it back to Born with Teeth. Everybody on this Zoom meeting knows and loves Jay Sullivan and Dylan Godwin. So if you didn't need to see the reading, Jay plays Christopher Marlowe, and Dylan plays William Shakespeare. And just so because we all know them, it'd be great to hear from you. What you felt they brought to the roles, and what that experience was like.
Well, you before I came out for that workshop, you told me you had two great company members who are just great for it, and I trust you. It's like, great, I'm looking forward to meeting them. And then they just killed me. They were so terrific. And in fact, we had a few days in a room rehearsing it, but then doing the reading in front of an audience, I kind of feel in my heart like that was the production. Like I got it. They gave that to me. They were so perfect. Yeah, Dylan, I mean, for one thing, there's obviously he's funny, and I gather he often does funny parts for you. And that's important. It's helpful, comic timing. But he brings this sort of soulfulness and moodiness and subtlety to Shakespeare, to this Shakespeare that I needed. And then Jay, also fantastic, whip smart timing, and being able to bring this, sort of mercurial flash to Marlowe. But most of all, the way that they play off each other, the fact that they have a theatrical relationship, that they have worked together before. I mean, that's, Shakespeare wrote for a company. Moliere wrote for a company. It's one thing I miss as a present day playwright, is not getting to write for a company, because actors develop these shorthands with each other, and you need actors to play off each other. And instead of having a couple of strangers, these guys who, but they're just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I just just talking about it makes me want to get into the theater right now and get to work. But I know it feels so long, but it's time to open it up for a question and answer, and I'm going to change my screen to gallery so I can see you. So if you have a question for Liz, go to your reaction button, which is next to the record button. Oh, and I should have said at the beginning, Daryl, I'm sorry I didn't say it, that we're recording. And this is for this is for sharing it with other audience members. But we're recording, and right next to the record button, you've got a reaction button, and you can. Oh no, you can't raise you can do a thumbs up. So I guess do a thumbs up, and I'll take that as okay. Michelle.
Yeah, I absolutely adored the reading of Born with Teeth. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and Jay and Dylan were amazing, and I can't wait to see how it can be made even better with costumes and scenery and all of that, because I thought it was so, you got so drawn in and so into it and entertained. I thought it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So.
Thank you, Michelle. That's awesome. Awesome.
Okay.
Kristen.
Yeah. Hi. I have a little bit of a technical question. I was so impressed, blown away with the reading of Born with Teeth that I started kind of reading a little bit of Marlowe and Shakespeare. And oddly enough, from my son, he told me at the time that there was a period of time where secular plays were outlawed. You could only do religious material. And so my question is, I loved the tension and how oppressive you got the feel of that police state. And it also felt like a sweatshop, like they had to crank out a whole bunch of new material desperately fast. So how close was that switch from the secular plays were outlawed and now religious plays, because, now we need secular plays. How did that all work in?
Well, I'm wondering which period your son was talking about, because there was a period following, not directly, but not between this period and the Restoration. Of course, there was a period of, I think, 18 years during the Commonwealth where all theater was banned, except, oddly, some opera. But and the previous period, the medieval, before the English Renaissance, with morality plays, I think maybe that's what he's talking about, because yeah, I think theater, I mean, theater came out of the church really, and in that way. What an interesting question. But I think in the English Renaissance, which was a language Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance was sort of visual, and the English Renaissance was about theater and writing and poetry. I think it was just too powerful a force to be stopped. And people did want to, risky as it was, people did want to see plays that were about, all those history plays that Shakespeare wrote was his way of writing about the present moment in a way that maybe was a little safer, right? I feel like I'm rambling around your question.
But also, and I just know this from Jim Shapiro that we think that that Shakespeare probably saw some of those morality plays when he was a child, because they would travel and they would set up in little carts, right? So when one cart would be the story of Noah, and you do the story of Noah, and then another cart would be the story of Abraham and Isaac and stuff like that, and you'd see that little thing. But there were characters from the morality plays, and they were much more religious, right? That actually kind of come like the character of the vice, the gluttonous vice, and we think that Falstaff is in some ways kind of a more realistic version of the old vice, and there are lots of references in Shakespeare to the period of theater that your son is talking about, which was much more religious.
And I'm sorry, I just have to say that in my post-apocalyptic play Doc Act, they are traveling players, and they do a version of the morality plays, which is called the mortality play. That was a mashup of morality plays and vaudeville. But anyway.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
Dean.
So my question was after you worked on the play, or did you work on the play in Houston, and did you make any changes, or did you have any insights, or was it pretty much all fixed?
I was pretty fixed. I probably did change a few words. Maybe Rob will remember. I have a tendency to go into rehearsal 99% finished, because I think I'm too nervous to rewrite in rehearsal. Like I need to get it as far as possible there. I had moments. What I found revelatory was finding out how it functioned. There were moments, like there was a moment in when we got into the theater, and they were rehearsing with what do you call it, the music stands, and there's a moment that got very intimate, and Jay crossed over to Dylan's music stand, and they read off the same script for a scene before he went back, and just something subtle like that, it started to give me a feeling of how the play is going to work when it's really alive. But I feel like there were tweaks, but I don't remember. Rob, do you remember any?
Well, because I worked with you a lot,
yeah.
And there's some playwrights who come in with a big mess, and they're like, and which is okay, it's not wrong. It's just a different approach. It's just they come in, and scenes are moving, and and they lose the play, and then they find the play again, and they're doing it. But other playwrights, and Liz is definitely in this category, really, by the time they're ready to show it to someone, they're pretty sure this scene, and it's really about tweaks, not about big rewrites. That's been true with everything we've worked on, I think.
Great.
I mean, and it's partly because of the process of writing, where one thing leads to another in the process of writing. It's not modular, and it would be, like I'm always amazed when people rearrange scenes, because I just wouldn't be capable of doing it. It just wouldn't. It would fall apart. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Liz, thank you so much for your time to do this. I can't tell you, it is always fascinating to hear playwrights, but it's even more fascinating when you have historical facts and about real people. And to us in the Western culture, no one is more important than Shakespeare, and to learn more about him and Marlowe, to realize the importance of Marlowe, just so great. And
Well,
so
I just want to say thank you, Dean, and thank you, Rob, and thank you, Alley Theater. I mean, it's been, I had such a wonderful time out there for the workshop. I'm so excited and grateful that you're going to premiere it.
well, we're really looking forward to it. All we have to do is get all this COVID things to cooperate with us
Yeah.
as we go through it, because we want to do your play justice. When we open your play, it needs to be done right. So that's the most important thing. And I really want to thank our chairs once again, and all of you for attending tonight. And we look forward to more doing more events in the future, and sharing the inside of the theater. There's nothing more, I will tell you, we miss having people in the audience. We miss you so much, having live people and being at places where groups can gather, where they can sit in the same theater together and share the same experience together. When you don't have live theater, you realize how much you miss it. It is not the same. We can all sit at home until we're blue in the face with watching Netflix and every other thing that's on the television, and you just want to throw up, and you say, I don't want that. I want to be with actors. I want to be with people. I want to congregate and share a common experience. And that is what the theater does. And we will be back again, and we will get this done. We're working and working and working. And I want you all to know also, we have more protocols in place than you could shake a stick at. We've already changed all the filters in all of our buildings, and we've done all these things, and we will be back. And it's for plays like this that we have to be back and share that common experience. So thank you, Rob. Thank you, Liz. Thank you all for coming tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks, Liz.